But we're here just to have the entire seminar, which is the interdisciplinary seminar for the Institute for Humanities at UCT, and where we present research and also are able to engage issues particularly centered on some of the questions that interest us, and really centered around the question of being human. We are honored today to have Macaire Eyenga, who is coming to us from the University of Dschang, and also from Sciences Po, and also affiliated to the University of Wits University, particularly with Wiser, where he's been for some time, and previously postdoc, but also associate researcher. But since 2025, he is leading the research unit for political, strategic, and social analysis, which has a long name, UPOSOC, at the University of Dschang. But really, his work is really looking at questions of surveillance technologies, biometrics, medical drones, and digital platforms. And he's done work a lot in Ghana, in particular, but also looking at many different places. And being a recipient of the Gerda Foundation grant, but also Erasmus Mundus, and also many others. So today we are here to listen to his talk, which is about digital population registries and AI in Africa, which is part of his visiting fellowship within the Carnegie-funded initiative at HUMA. And we are grateful to Carnegie for making it possible, despite the challenges, for Josh to be here. And we're looking forward to engaging and listening to some of the work that he is doing, but also has been developing while he's here. And also other collaborations that we have been seeking to build, particularly with his laboratory at the University of Dschang in Cameroon. So thank you for agreeing, and we look forward to listening to you.
Thank you so much, Divine. Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank you to welcome me at HUMA. It is my first time here, like a research fellow, so I'm very happy, and I want to thank also all my colleagues to all the moment we share since I came here in Cape Town at HUMA. So I will start with my presentation. Like you can see, the title is Digital Population Registry and AI in Africa. Is part of a research I started to do since a few years now. So let's start. Over the past few years, my research on Technoscape has examined how states in Cameroon and more broadly in African states have been reshaped by processes of technicization. The increasing integration of technology into everyday life, governance, and administrative system. One critical side of this transformation is the digital population register. Traditionally, such register civil, electoral, fiscal, and vital statistics function as official record to list and identify individuals within a given territory. Why some countries have sought to unify this register as India, other systems, for example. Such other countries like Cameroon maintain fragmented and non-interoperable system. So the progressive digitization of this register has turned them into database containing both biographical and biometric data. Technicization here entails a reconfiguration of relationship between individuals, the artifact that identify them, and a symbolic system that encode this identity biometrically. It standardizes, simplify, and stabilize identification practices, embedding them in digital infrastructure, what we call mechanization, algorithmic processes, what we call algorithmization, and routinized human practices, what we call habituation. For government, this system represents critical infrastructure for population knowledge and control, as well as for the design of public policies. My previous study on the challenge of obtaining a national identity card and the biometric transformation of voter and the everyday work of electoral agents reveal both the promise and limitation of these systems. Yet the technology itself, particularly it relies on artificial intelligence in biometric enrollment and data management, remain underexplored. My current work asks whether the integration of artificial intelligence into digital population register foster more equitable, transparent, and inclusive system, or whether it depends inequality and exclusion. On empirical research conducted in Cameroon between 2021 and 2025, and using a science and technology study approach framework that view register as a techno-political infrastructure, the analysis is structured in 4 parts. First, the social and political context of digital register production. Second, the technicization of voter via biometrics. Third, the form of artificial intelligence in use. And last one, the implication of the ideal and reality of population identification. Now I'll start with the social and political context of digital population register. Population register in Africa can be understood as infrastructure of state legibilities, in the sense developed by James Scott in Seem Like a State. As many of you know, Scott shows how states have historically sought to make society legible by developing instruments of measurement, classification, quantification, tools that allow them to count, order, and govern. In the African context, the management of population illustrates this dynamic quite clearly. Under the colonial rule, register largely took the form of administrative census and individual identification documents, such as native pass, work permit, or labor card. These instruments were primarily designed to control the labor force, to enforce taxation, and to regulate mobility. They clearly distinguish between colonizer and colonized, and were less about granting rights than about organizing economic exploitation and social control. In the post-colonial period, this register assumed a new role. They become instruments of nation-state, key to citizenship, access to right, health, education, voting, and to developmental planning. Yet, this emancipatory potential has always been ambivalent. Since such register retain a strong dimension of control, they could restrict mobilities, reinforce security, surveillance, or exclude certain groups, refugees, minorities, or undocumented. Today, with the rise of digital register, we are witnessing a turning point. This system emerged in a dual context. On the one hand, African states seek to consolidate their legitimacy and capacity to govern, often invoking the promise of social and economic inclusion. providing a legal identity to millions of unregistered people, enabling access to public services and financial market. On the other hand, their rollout is heavily shaped by transnational programs, such as the World Bank ID for Development Initiative, which place Africa within a broader global project of digitization and standardization of identity. Added to this is a political and security environment marked by concern over election, terrorism, and cross-border mobilities. In short, digital population registers stand as both a promise of inclusion and a tool of control, embodying a constant tension between the expansion of rights and the reproduction of exclusion. Now, I will move to the second point about the technicalization of population register. The history of population register in Africa cannot be fully understood, without examining the way in which technology has gradually introduced. As key Breckenridge demonstrate in biometric state, the use of biometric date back to colonial and apartheid era South Africa, where fingerprints were employed from the early 20th century to identify and control African workers. Initially conceived as a tool of surveillance and segregation, this technology illustrates how technoscientific innovation is embedded within a specific political and social regime. In the post-colonial period, the use of technology expanded and transformed. From 1919 to 2000 onward, many African countries began in electronic machine, portable biometric kit, and digital database for registering voters and citizens. For example, the introduction of biometric voter registration in DRC in 2025, Ghana in 2011, and Cameroon in 2012 was presented as a means of ensuring electoral transparencies by reducing fraud related to duplicate registration. Similarly, in Nigeria, the Independent National Electoral Commission implemented biometrics kit as early as 2011 to verify voter identities with the aim of restoring trust in a system made by contestation. These innovations have profoundly reshaped the way states know and administer their population. Whereas paper registers were fragmented, incomplete, and vulnerable to local manipulation, biometric technologies and centralized database, in theory, allow for the unification and standardization of information. Identity is no longer merely recorded in a document. It is now encapsulated within a machine and ensured in a bodily datum, fingerprint, facial recognition, or iris scan, transforming the relation between the individual and the state. Yet this technical promise is not realized without tension. In Cameroon, for example, in 2016, civil identification reform aimed at ensuring biometric national identity card was a total fiasco, producing what I have called undocumented at home. To this day, Cameroon struggled with limited success to build a viable and effective civil registration system. Once again, this year, as Cameroon prepared for a new election in October 2025, intense dispute has unfolding around the voter register, with people being excluded and children under the age of 20 found listed despite not yet being legally eligible to vote, amongst other issues. In Kenya, the HUMA number project launched in 2019 to centralize civil registration and biometric data sparked intense public debate over data privacy, the risk of excluding marginalized population, particularly in border regions, and the growing reach of the state into citizen private life. In DSC, the introduction of electronic machine for voting in 2018 election was denounced by the opposition as a tool of political manipulation, highlighting the highly contentious nature of technology in the context of low institutional trust. Thus, the introduction of technologies into population register produce a configuration of the state legibility. It provides greater accuracy, enhanced inclusion, and increased transparency, but it also introduced new form of vulnerability, exclusion, and contestation. By linking identity to digital and biometric device, this register no longer simply count population. They participate in redefining the very condition of political and social belonging. Now we are reached at the head of our presentation, the AI in population register. Overall, we can distinguish four form of artificial intelligence currently shaping population register. The first and perhaps the most visible is biometric recognition. At its core, this form of AI relies on deep learning algorithm designed to extract and compare unique feature, fingerprint, facial trait, iris pattern, in order to assign a secure identity, the digital identity to each individual. Across Africa, many states have adopted automated fingerprint identification system, namely AFIS, that achieve accuracy rate close to 99%. The Ghana card stands out as a key example. Its national database centralized biometric and demographic data, which is then used for access to health services, election, and banking. By mobilizing biometric AI, Ghana and other African countries have streamlined identification procedure, reduced fraud, and strengthening the traceability of citizens in their interaction with the state. The second, equally crucial application of AI is what I call algorithmic deduplication and the fight against identity fraud. That one. Deduplication refers to the ability of AI system to automatically detect duplicate and or fraudulent record. Biometric enrollment platform rely on similarity matching algorithm that compare new entries with the entire database in real time. In Uganda, as well as in Cameroon, for instance, the integration of fingerprint biometric into electoral roll has eliminated duplicate and reinforced the integrity of the electoral process. Likewise, in Burkina Faso, AI-powered fingerprint minutiae analysis has become an essential safeguard for securing voter registry. This deduplication mechanism significantly reduce the risk of identity fraud and enhance trust in population register, particularly in the context where state legitimacy is fragile. The third dimension involves real-time authentication combined with liveness detection, this one. In this case, algorithms are not only tasked with confirming an identity, but also with verifying that the person being enrolled is a living human, rather than an artifact such as a photograph, a mask, or a computer-generated image. Companies like Verify Africa have developed technological solutions that made facial recognition, passive motion detection, and micro-expression analysis to secure know your customers procedure in banking and telecommunication across West Africa. This integration of AI ensures the reliability of biometric enrollment and protect digital identity system from increasingly sophisticated attack, such as deepfake or video forgery. It also illustrates a convergence between state security imperative and private sector demand for robust anti-fraud system. Finally, a fourth and more recent development is the introduction of risk analysis and predictive scoring mechanism. Here, AI system move beyond simple verification to assign each individual a score based on perceived reliabilities, behavioral pattern, and risk level. In Kenya, for example, API PNF system used for monitoring travel flow deploy AI algorithm that categorize passengers into risk groups, red, greens, yellow, something like that, on the basis of mobility data and behavioral profiling. Similar application introduced in partnership with FIM, such as Travisory, the leading provider of digital border solution. CITA, the International Air Transport Telecommunications Society, signal a shift from population register as a mere tool of identification toward instrument of predictive surveillance. Why this enhance the capacity of state to anticipate security and health-related threat, it simultaneously raised pressing concern regarding fundamental rights and the danger of opaque algorithmic governance. Taken together, these four forms of AI, biometric recognition, deduplication, liveness detection, and predictive scoring, constitute the technical backbone of population register digitization in Africa. They reflect both a drive for state modernization and a growing dependency on complex infrastructure, often supplied by international private actors. The stake extends far beyond technical efficiency. They engage broader debate about digital sovereignty, data protection, and social justice in the governance of identity in the 21st century. Now moving on the ethical implication of AI on population register. The rise of AI in population register across Africa opened a new field of inquiry that extends beyond mere technical consideration, touching upon pressing ethical, political, and social debate. This technology encompasses biometric recognition, algorithmic deduplication, liveness detection, and predictive scoring, are often present as instruments of state rationalization and modernization. Yet, from the perspective of science and technology study, they should be analyzed as socio-technical assemblages that reconfigure relationship between state, citizen, private actors, embedding within their infrastructure implicit political choice, algorithmic bias, and power asymmetries. A first ethical challenge lies in the tension between security and individual freedom. Biometric identification technology are promoted as solution to fraud and legal invisibility. However, their deployment transforms identity into a calculable, traceable, and controllable object. By leveraging AI, population registers no longer merely recognize individuals. They anticipate and predict behavior, as demonstrated by predictive scoring system applied to travelers in Kenya. This expansion of control resembles algorithmic governmentality, where citizen rights may be subordinate to opaque automated decision, rarely contestable. Ethical reflection here involves balancing administrative efficiency against privacy protection, while also addressing the risk of reducing citizenship to a set of probabilistic data points. A second concern involves inclusion and exclusion. AI in population register is often justified as a tool for including the invisible, million of Africans without legal document or formal identity. Yet, the very technology intended to promote inclusion can produce new form of exclusion. For instance, individual whose fingerprint cannot be reliably captured illustrate how technical systems reproduce hierarchy between those who are registrable and those left marginalized. Similarly, algorithmic bias in facial recognition trained on dataset poorly representative of African phenotype can generate systematic errors for certain populations. SCS perspective underscore that AI is never neutral. It materializes and amplifies pre-existing power relation, rendering already marginalized population further invisible. Ethical concern also extend to justice and digital sovereignty. Many African countries rely on technological solutions provided by international firms, CETA, Travisori, Gemalto, Idemia, Saframorpho, Veridos, etc., raising issue of technological capture and structural dependency. National register, far from being purely sovereign instrument, are embedded in the global political economy where biometric data become strategic, potentially extraterritorial resources. Justice, therefore, is not limited to equitable access. It demands reflection on who control, who own, and benefit from African identity data. Finally, AI-assist population register should be understood as a hybrid political object that redefine the very notion of belonging. By embedding automated identification criteria into database, this system determines who is recognized as a citizen, deemed trustworthy, or considered suspicious. Technology in this sense not only merely reflects social reality, it performs it, creating invisible boundary between legitimate and risking bodies. From our perspective, this performativity is crucial. AI is not a neutral tool of rationalization, but a normative infrastructure that redistribute the value and dignity of citizenship. In conclusion, such technology should be analyzed less as technical innovation than a political object shaped by logic of control, dependency, and normalization. The ethic of this system cannot be reduced to code of conduct. They require a fundamental reflection on the citizen place in digital society, the form of justice emerging under algorithmic practices, and the ability of African states to negotiate sovereignty in a global data economy. In other words, what is at stake is not only the technology itself, but the future of African democracy in the face of infrastructure that, while claiming to include risk fragmenting and hierarchizing citizenship. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, George, for giving us your attention also. Yeah, and for sharing both your research work and the conceptual and theoretical grounding in it. I'm going to open it first to colleagues to see what questions, reflections might you have for George. Yes, Advel, also fine to George.
Yes, thank you, John, for your presentation. Really interesting. And I am sitting here thinking about the territorial component of the control. And here you are presenting us how belonging is shaped by AI now. Our states are trying to make belonging and to belong validated via AI. And in a context like the Cameroonian one, and I guess almost the same everywhere on the continent, belonging is really related to the territory. Usually people ask, what is your village? If you cannot name the place of where you cannot name your village, you almost not belong. So I wonder how in what you have presented, the control of the bodies is the way to control the territory, because in a context like the Cameroonian context, where we have more than almost 2,000 kilometers border with Nigeria, the control of the territory is an issue. So I am under the impression that to control the border, now we are controlling the bodies, the identities. That is my question.
Okay, thank you so much, Axel. What I can say to you is that in Cameroon, the state tried now to develop different kind of instrument to control the both elements you just mentioned, to control space, to control population, to control mobilities. And it is true that in the past, when to identify your belonging, they can ask you where's your village, where your parent come from, something like that. But in the bureaucratic state, this kind of practices started to become obsolete. State need to have a mathematical knowledge of the population, and this kind of scientific knowledge have to pass through the deployment of this kind of instrument like AI, like the necessity for you to have an ID card, the necessity for you to have a birth certificate, the necessity for you to be registered in database, the necessity to you to present those documents when you move between different cities, when you move between countries in the same region, something like that. So it is what James Scott called the legibility of the society. State need to have this kind of possibility to know more even the territory or even the population they are using. So we just have to see and to reflect how this kind of instrument can be more ethical and cannot produce new kind of exclusion we already have before the GIUs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's a very powerful presentation. And the way you survey the guitar registration system across Africa is very impressive. I think I have two issues. One has to do with the ownership. You made mention of that. That is very important. To what extent is the African state owning these data sets? That is the first issue. And then the second issue has to do with the interoperability. Within the state, you see the state collecting data from different perspectives. And they are all collecting new set of biometrics for national ID, for voter ID, for health insurance. To what extent is African performing using the AI to ensure that the interoperability will really work? I don't know if you have some insight on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. The first question about ownership is the real problem we have now today in Africa, I know some guy, the name is James, something like that, who wrote a paper, namely, Who Own Africa Infrastructure, where we are talking about Africa development, that we are happy to have a new road, new airport, new bridge, something like that, but who own this kind of infrastructure? And when we are talking about the ownership, it's not only about the legal ownership, because we can be the legal owner of an infrastructure. But if you was not part of the building of that infrastructure, that means that you don't have access to the archive, technological archive, who people use to build that infrastructure and to maintain that infrastructure. And like today in digital world, we have what we call copy and collate, copy and paste. So, and in many African countries, like in Ghana and the government have this what they call the public-private partnership with what they call build, operate, transfer model, and they use foreign company to build infrastructure to record people and to build data center to host data. And those data centers, sometimes they are not located in Africa. Sometimes they are located too far from Africa. And you can have access to those data, but sometimes the company who provide the technology also have access to those data. I can take the example of Mali. You remember after the coup d'etat in Mali, for example, a very controversy raised between the new government in Mali and IDEMIA company who have the database of population. And the new government wanted to get access to those data, and the company refused to give access. So this is a little bit our problem. So maybe we can refer how African government can try to build their own infrastructure, who can host their own data and maintain it properly. That's the first question. But the second question is about, you say about interoperability. Yes. We have a lot of debate today between centralized database, a unique database, and decentralized database. Because in the past, people believe that if we have only one database who hosts all information of population, like India try to do with other systems, it can be very easy to use the same database to deliver different kind of services. But with the time, this kind of practices started to become very problematic, because the fact that if you are not inside this database, you are excluded from all services. But in the fragmented system, for example, where we have different databases, you cannot, for example, in Cameroon, you cannot, some people don't have ID card, they can sometimes get access to health services, education, financial services, you see? So for the moment, we don't have this kind of normative view about what is good or not. But we believe that on the expense aspect, how much we pay for that. Sometimes it's very expensive to maintain different kind of database. It's very expensive because if you have sometimes 10 database, health, justice, passport, ID, voter card, taxpayer, register, etc. It's sometimes different kind of supply you need, different kind of technology provider you need to. And if to be more concrete, in the case of Cameroon, is the Norwegian company who maintain taxpayer register. Norwegian company, an NGO. Is it's in Veridos, German company, who maintain voter register with his own contract. It is Argentic, who maintain passport register, database. And just a few years ago, it was Thales, French company, who produced our ID card. But now they decide to cancel the contract and give the same contract to Argentina. So the same company who produced passport in Cameroon is the same company who produced passport. So you can imagine what implications this have on that data of the country. And we have like this in many kind of services. It's very expensive for the state. It's very expensive. So maybe we need to document it empirically and maybe take time to observe it in the long period to see what kind of real implication this have on our population registration system or population register. Thank you.
Abena?
Yeah.
The populace. I don't know if that was something you were interested in, but what do you think are people's responses to the government's use of AI for registration and ID cards and all of that? And I'm asking because you also mentioned the issue of exclusion, and that is one of the problems we have in Ghana, where the very system that is supposed to be inclusive systematically and actively exclude certain people from certain backgrounds.
Like for example, people with big sleep, for example. So I understand what you say. You know, we can, AI is just a future embedded in a technological infrastructure called biometric kit. Like Messi explained that time. You will not find a specific infrastructure or technology named AI like this. It's something who is embedded, is a kind of algorithm embedded in a huge infrastructure. And in our context, for example, debate has been we have debate about if we need to use biometric for registration or not. And everybody have agreed that we need to use biometric because it more, all this promotion around technology. But now the problem, and I have this discussion, the problem is how we train our system, our AI system to be able to recognize our kind of body. And during a fieldwork in Cameroon, when I was working on voter registration, some local agent, a civil agent who registered people told me that when they try to photograph a person who has big sleep, yeah, the computer say, ask to the person to close the, because, and because it's looking at the person, the mouth of the person is open. And the person only have a big sleep, like, so this kind of problem is need to be debated. And we also have the rate of fingerprint. Normally in the machine we can set up how much level we need to validate a fingerprint record. You can put 50%, 60%, 70%, it depends. And when during the record, when you put your hand on the machine, it will change to reach that percentage. And this is a problem because there are some people who their fingerprint cannot arrive to 40% due to agricultural tax, this kind of thing. And those people sometimes cannot be registered. So the problem is that it's not about the fact that AI or the infrastructure don't want to register people. It's about how we can set up the machine, how we can try to make a program. Maybe Messi can explain it better. How we can design the algorithm to make it fit with our context. And that is a big problem because like the fact that the technology is built by a foreign company, sometimes we don't have access to that technology during the process of innovation.
Yes.
And today, due to the global market, we have black box. Technology is sometimes black box. We have sometimes what they call vendor locking. You cannot change your provider like you want, and you cannot have access to different you cannot get access to the invisible part of the infrastructure. And so I'm totally agree with you. It is a huge question.
Yeah. And you can't tamper with it also because of how do you say warranty, guarantee.
Yes.
So when you buy technology, but
Yes, yeah.
It's very fascinating and it really needed time to digest and think about and for the discussion also things are becoming even more clear. And I like your when you said like because of the farming, a lot of people are sent like they can't 40% of the
There's a fingerprint
is not
sensitivity. Yeah.
doesn't, yeah, I mean in our
Structure.
case we always said they always send back women Sudanese women. They told them when your henna is removed, then come back to we can take your so it's like yeah. But there's something that caught my attention, which was you talked about undocumented at home. And I think it's very interesting, it's very powerful, it's something that we really need to think about. And one of the things that I would say, like the way, if we want to make algorithm fair, we have to be also fair. Us, you know, starting about ourselves and starting about reflecting on a lot of things, you know, because someone who is living in a middle class, you know, kind of, or you know, someone who's middle class or someone who had the opportunity to just be, you know, documented, had the opportunity and had the privilege, you know, to have an ID card. Yeah, I mean, even if I mean, I'm sure like we will have that particular kind of access. But I was thinking what I was thinking, and this is something that was triggered when I was watching all those Didwila operations and how they're kind of, you know, like refusing people to access healthcare, going into hospitals because they're undocumented immigrants. And I was like, okay, wow, so all South Africans are documented. This is why Didwila actually can, you know, can decide, you know, like who is documented. The only ones who are not documented were the immigrants, but I don't think that's the case. You know, I'm sure that there's a lot of South Africans who are not documented, you know, and I mean, at least in Sudan, I would imagine if why we started to not letting people enter in hospitals because of they are not documenting, we're going to exclude also a lot of Sudanese. And back to the question of Excel, you know, like how could we, you know, make that system plural, you know, plural, being all those pluralities together, you know, bringing the system of the traditional system, the local system of knowing each other, identifying each other, you know, knowing that that person belongs to this land or this that person is coming from that religion. At the same time, having that kind of, you know, technology. If you get my, how could we plurality, a kind of, you know, like I forgot the name of the guy. He's also science and technology, but he comes from a very decolonial perspective of science and technology. So Zimbabwe, his name.
Oh, Chigudu.
Huh?
Chigudu.
No. I just forgot his name, but how he talked about like this, like are we talking about plurality? Do we want to embed a different system that has nothing to delink, basically, you know, having a different system that really talks and speaks to our realities, or are we gonna bring like this plural different kind of identification, and they should not be in contrast. They should not, you know, like you know, like contradict each other, but they could be together. They could exist together. That's my.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Azra. This is a very big question you asked, and for the moment we don't have to respond to that question because what I can say to you is just to the fact that since you know when you see sustainable development goal, the United Nations try to promote what we call leave no one behind.
Yeah.
I have just published a paper on that. Leave no one behind means that in all development projects today, we have to make sure that nobody can be behind, and it has a component about legal identity, how to make sure that everybody can get access to legal identity, and millions of people don't have access to it because it's a huge problem, and it's not only African problem or some African problem. In many countries, in UK, they have the same problem. They have to build a good social security system. In Asia and in many parts, because it's not easy to build. And sometimes you can believe that it's because they don't want to register people. It's not about that. Because when you do the field work, you can have a conversation with civil servants who have to register people, and they can explain all the difficulty they face every day to register people, the lack of resources, the problem of machine when they have to go to the remote place where state is, scarcity of state. We have this kind of place where you don't have state, but you have a lot of people there. And at the same time, how to register people in some contexts where people don't want to be registered. That is another problem, because we sometimes have the assumption that everybody wants to be registered. But there are some villages where you go, they don't care about registration because they don't care about public services. They don't care about what you do in the public services or what you do in the state. Just what they want is to have peace to live, and they say in their own place, and they are not part of the national data. But another thing now, and we end that point, maybe we can consider that, okay, we will stop this kind of technological registration and we will come back to our previous way to recognize people, something like that. But we are living in the context where we need to have a particular configuration because we are working with international people, for example. If we need to plan public policy, you need funding for public development aid, something like that. We need to know what is the population size, what will be the need of this population in education, health, this thing for the next 10, 20 years. We need to make a planification. And when you start a planification, it's a scientific task. And to improve in your scientific planification, you need to have figure, you need to have number, and you need to trust in those numbers you have so you can make a good planification. And that's the problem. Yeah. So that is what I wanted to.
Great. I know that Nabil has a question, but just 1 minute.
Yeah. 1 minute.
Exactly, just 1 minute.
Yeah, it's just comment. Point question. Thank you so much. And you referred to state simplification, registries, and the use of AI. I don't know, and also like the racial aspects of it, phenotypes, detecting the facial recognition and identification. So it's AI and machine learning depends on the derivation of line of best fit, and it's something that relies on partitioning, segmenting, or dividing, creating these borders. So I don't know, how can we do that, to go beyond this bio-racism, techno-racism.
Yes, just to jump on that, 2 days before me and Messier, when you take ChatGPT, have a software called Sora to generate image. When we try to generate one image, a specific topic, and the AI automatically generate not black someone.
Yes.
But when we on the prompt, when we say African or black face, so we got this kind of, and Messi say, you see, the black face didn't appear, African face didn't appear immediately when you request. That means that, but for me, we need to build our own technological infrastructure. That is in the normative approach, because what I'm talking now is a normative approach. We need to build to solve this problem. We need to build our own technical infrastructure. We need to build our own AI on our own data, on our own infrastructure, and have the possibility to maintain it without need to go to a Western technology provider. If we don't, and we need also to have our own internet. That's
Great. That's a good way to close. Thank you very much, George.
Thank you.
And